We did it. Hello, this is Let's Talk About Myths, baby. And I am your host, Liv. And today we're here with a very special, I'm slowly losing my mind. And so we're coming up with creative ways to make episodes. And thus, I didn't even know how to finish that sentence. I started it, then I lost track because ADHD. I'm here with Michaela today. Hi, Michaela.
Hello. Hi.
So today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to vaguely explain it. This is what our plan is. So today for the regular podcast, we are going to be talking about the Odyssey. Some interesting things that I have found while it slowly consumes my soul while I'm working on this book, and which I would love to ramble about with Michaela because I can't jam it into a children's book. You'll see why. And then... And to some of you, you'll hear all of this or little bits and pieces, but we're really just teasing stuff. After we've had a little bit of a chat about the Odyssey, which is going to go on the main podcast feed. So all of you now, you might be hearing it there. But if you're a patron on our Oracle Edition Patreon, then we're going to be answering a bunch of patron questions. And all of this is also going to be available on video on the Patreon. So if you're not a patron, but that sounds appealing to you, having patron-specific questions answered by me and Michaela and or just watching us on video, head on over there and also get ad-free episodes of everything and help us pay the bills. That's where we're at. So, this is me going, how do I transition? Okay, so
Odyssey.
Thank you for just, sitting with me on this, Michaela. The number of thoughts I've had while writing this. So,
I know.
To the listeners, you've probably heard me talking about it at this point, but I am working on a children's retelling of the Odyssey, and what that entails is obviously heavily shortening the Odyssey into something that is, we're doing it, it's for 9 to 13-year-olds if I recall, and it's very illustrated, so I'm having to drill down the text quite heavily. But on top of that, also, if I can't go into context, contextual depth on things, I'm kind of having to remove a lot of it, mostly because I am not willing to talk about things without being able to do the context. It's very hard. But one of the things that keeps coming up for me is, well, I guess what the starting point is the colonization that happens in the Odyssey, because obviously that's what I want to talk about. But I don't even know how to get into this, but the whole of the Odyssey is just about Odysseus going around and fucking shit up.
Well, and the thing is, the central theme of the Odyssey is really Xenia, right? So this sort of guest friendship relationship that happens between people, not just on an interpersonal level, but on a visiting other cultures level. But it is entirely through the Greek lens of the ancient Greek lens of what that should look like. And I was thinking on this because we mentioned we agreed to do this, and I was sort of thinking on the ways it is portrayed and sort of the complexities of Homer, where, in the Iliad itself, it's not a yay Greeks kind of story. It is a very oh, look at them, nobody who is good really. And the Trojans are kind of portrayed more positive, way more positively, exactly, than the Greeks. But then I was thinking about that sort of that double view of it, where you're looking at it's not trying to say this is the right thing. And I was curious if that's happening in the Odyssey as well. And when I was just thinking on it more and more, and I think there is something there where that idea of shoving your ideals on other cultures is, and had that being sort of a Greek mindset, I think it is being critiqued in the Odyssey, especially when I look at the other, not necessarily the Cyclops, we'll get into that. I think that is still there, but all the other people that they meet on their way. I think it is very much critiquing the idea that our way is the right way. It's well, if you're in the Greek world, yes, but if you're in, you know, the world of the Lotus Eaters, is it the right way, or is that should you be respecting their culture, you know, when in Rome, kind of thing.
No, that's so true, and you're right. Like the Odyssey.
Sorry, my cat just got fed.
that everyone was Crow's food coming through his little automatic feeder. We love it. He's pumped. Look at that little void. He's like, this is my time.
Already in.
But no, so yes, the Odyssey so revolves around this idea of Xenia, and because, you know, at the beginning, obviously the Odyssey opens, you know, with the 4 books that are referred to as the Telemachy. Like they are the, you know, the story of, we do get this early introduction to Odysseus, but in really minor detail. And then we jump straight into Telemachus and all of his whiny little bitching. Yeah. And I won't go through all of that, but it does really get heavily into this idea of Xenia, because we have the suitors in Ithaca trying to win Penelope. And then Telemachus goes to Nestor, and he's, you know, has that Xenia relationship where he is welcomed. They have like a mutual sharing of things and general, like, because it's really about sharing. It's about sharing gifts, but it's also about just sharing like yourself, and this like it's about mutual respect, I guess, is the simplest way to put it. It's about mutual respect, and we get this like really clearly through the Telemachy. And then we get to Odysseus. And it's interesting, like I won't touch Calypso yet, I don't think, because we're getting in 7 years in when we first meet Odysseus. He's been there 7 years, and so everything is kind of already in the past. But then he lands on the land of the Phaeacians, right? Who show him really good Xenia. There's like a really good example of, he goes there, he is in need, they, you know, shower him with gifts, they hold this big athletic games where everyone gets oiled up and naked and wrestles each other.
Of course.
Why not? Then they have this like mutual sharing of stories, and Odysseus shares his story. And what interested me, like that beginning, one of my favorite things is that Odysseus, when he begins his story, he basically begins by being like, hi, my name is Odysseus. Like, well, actually, even backing it up, like the best part is that first they have a bard, the Phaeacians have a bard who is Odysseus, who has not told anyone his name. They just think he's some stranger. Odysseus is like, hey, Demodocus, the bard, you're really talented. I would love if you sang the song of Odysseus and the Trojan horse. And the bard is like, oh, I'd love to. What a great story. And he sings this whole story about the Trojan horse. And then Odysseus is like, we next see him and he's fucking crying. And the king is like, dude, why are you crying? Like, he's like, oh, this is a great story, but like, oh, not everyone likes it. Like, something's wrong. Why don't you tell us what your name is? Like, you're going to have to tell us where you're from eventually. We have to get you home tomorrow. And so Odysseus is like, hi, I'm Odysseus. You literally just sang a song about me. I'm incredibly talented at lying. Here's my story. Like, that is what he opens it with. He's like, I am famous for my lies. Here's my story. And so you're immediately like, well, like, what of this is true? What is not? And that's so interesting.
He's the first unreliable narrator. And absolutely. I love it. I think that is so fascinating about his character. You know me, I'm not a huge Odysseus fan. I'm not a huge Odyssey fan, despite the fact that the Odyssey is my freaking primary source for my thesis, but it's fine. It's fine.
The Odyssey is the best, even if Odysseus is a piece of shit. Truly. Them facts.
It's a very interesting way to introduce a character's story by reminding the audience, not just his audience within the story, but the audience who is us listening to it, that he lies. He will lie to make himself, and I guess the Greeks, appear better. He is being honest about that. You know, it's the one truth he will tell us.
Yeah, is that he's good at not telling the truth.
He's good at lying. He's gonna lie.
Yeah. No, exactly. And then so for him to immediately launch into this story, which, okay, so I think it's or a good idea to like maybe go through each of these moments, because they really say something interesting about Odysseus and Xenia and like the Greek culture of that period. Yeah. Because like first up we have this bit is so brief, and it's so interesting that it is so brief, because he's like, so, you know, we set off from Troy, we were headed home, but then the winds blew us off course. They blew us north to Ismarus, which is like on the coast of Thrace. So it's just north of Troy. It's out of the way. They get blown there. And he literally says, okay, hold on. Actually, we're not going to cut much of this because we don't have time. But what he says is, okay, a blast. This is from the Wilson translation.
Beautiful.
A blast of wind pushed me off course towards the Cacones in Ismarus. I sacked the town and killed the men. We took their wives and shared their riches equally among us. Like that's the whole bit. And then like he does go into, they're they've done all of that. They've sacked the town, killed the men, stolen the women.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like feasting on the beach, and Odysseus is like, we gotta go. But he's like, I said we had to leave. My crew was like, no, we gotta feast. We're gonna enjoy ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then because they wait, the Cacones have time to have called in reinforcements, and they get attacked, and they lose a bunch of men, and it's not great. And so then they do sail off, and then sort of we're, getting to the next step, which from there they get like they get all the way to the coast of the Cape Malea, which is like the southernmost tip of the Peloponnese. So they get all the way to mainland Greece. They get pretty close. And then Odysseus says, once we hit Malea, another blast of wind drove us off course for 9 days. And so that's where they next land, on the land of the Lotus Eaters. And so, okay, so the Cacones, they don't even ask for Xenia. Xenia's not even like a question. He's like, and we do know also the Cacones are an ally of Troy in the war. So to Odysseus, he's like, well, we landed here. These guys were on the side of Troy. Like, we're literally just going to kill the men and enslave the women.
Yeah.
Period. And then, so it's really not so much a question there. It's just like, this is just what we're doing.
It's a reflection of
quote
the
unquote
war they were just in. It is just it's a ripple effect of after the Trojan War.
Yeah, exactly. But what interests me is that they don't go do it on purpose. They're like, we got blown there off course, so then we just killed everyone and burned the city. You're like,
did they?
No, exactly, right? Did they?
Because they keep getting, whenever they interact with these other cultures, they keep getting blown off course.
Exactly. And so it's like
an act of God, push them away.
Well, and at this point, we know like Odysseus stayed in Troy a little longer, and so there's this idea that he gets a little cursed because various things that happen because he stayed. Because Agamemnon stayed too. Things don't go well for him. But it's an interesting question of like, what is the gods, what is Odysseus, what is random, like all of these things. Because then they do get to the land of the Lotus Eaters, which is like 10 days of traveling, and then they get to this land, and he sends out his people to be like, okay, who's living here, like, can they give us anything, like, basically he's asking like, the people here, can we ask for Xenia, can we be their guests and get this kinds of transactional but equal relationship. And then when they don't show up, he goes to find them, and his men have eaten the quote unquote lotus, which is not lotus like we think of it. The botanists and the historians think it was the jujube tree, which is fascinating. And I learned today in my searching for this information for the book that it usually goes by the Arabic name of Sidr. It's like SIDR. And also, though, a scientific name is the lote tree, because you're like, well, it's still got that lotus connection. Anyway, the lotus makes these men completely forget who they are, and so Odysseus like drags them back. And so once again, we don't really have this like interaction with Xenia because it just doesn't have that sort of opportunity.
And it's a Greek concept. It exactly. So, the Phaeacians doing it shows that there is some sort of connection there. There is some sort of Greek influence there. It could go either way. It could have started in sort of that area, the Phaeacians era, and then moved to Greece, or Greece started, and then, it's one of those things. It is and it's it's an indicator of who is and who isn't sort of under the same cultural umbrella.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does tend to be that people locate the land of the Phaeacians, which is called Scyria, as Corfu, actually. So it's also like not far off. But there's also like a whole curse that goes with them of, they're Greek, but it's interesting. But what interests me is that, like, because you're right, the Phaeacians have the Xenia sort of inherent. That does come more naturally to them because they're Greek. But what's interesting to me is that, like, in terms of the Cacones and the Lotus Eaters, there is no Odysseus seeking his side of Xenia, whereas when he gets to the Cyclops, he does. He expects Xenia from the Cyclops, but he doesn't in the other cases. And I think that's because the Cacones, he's going to sack their city.
Enemy.
So it just doesn't
Yeah.
count.
Yeah.
He's at war with them. It doesn't count. And the Lotus Eaters, he doesn't encounter them. The men go, and technically I think they are given Xenia because they are welcomed and given food.
Yeah.
It's just that food makes them forget where they're from.
Just makes them high.
Exactly. But like technically, you know, I think that would still qualify as them abiding by Xenia because they're given a gift. It just happens to be drugged up. But then they go next to the island of the Cyclops. And that's where things get colonial, imperial, just wacky. Hold on, I'm finding, like, I want to read it because it is unhinged. And I'd actually sent quotes to Michaela here.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
I remember.
Because, okay, so I'm going to read a decent amount of this. Don't come for me. It is Emily Wilson's translation. Okay. So he says, they reach the country of the reckless Cyclops. I'm trying to decide what I'm quoting or what I'm not. But essentially he's saying, like, they trust the gods, but they don't plant food. They don't, they're essentially, his big complaint is that they're not like, oh, see, my brain is gone. I'm just going to read it. I'm not.
Yeah. Good plan.
Quote, they put trust in gods and do not plant their food from seed nor plow, and yet the barley, grain, and clustering wine grapes all flourish there, increased by rain from Zeus. They hold no councils, have no common laws, but live in caves on lofty mountaintops, and each makes laws for his own wife and children without concern for what the others think. And so breaking that down, Odysseus there is like an outward xenophobia. That's where I'm at with my pronunciation of Greek, is that I'm going to do it with English words. There is an outward xenophobia in this, which is that he is like critiquing how they live. But what's funny is, to me, and I think this goes hand in hand with what you're saying, Michaela, which is that the Odyssey is intentionally critiquing these things. Is that, like, listen, okay, so they put trust in gods, but they don't plant their food from seed or plow. But barley, grain, and grapes all flourish there. So he's like, they don't, they don't farm like we would, and yet they have everything they need.
Well, and I also think what's interesting is that there is a reflection of what the land is capable of here. Like Ithaca itself, if we just look at Ithaca is rocky. It is, that's how it's described. Goats. It is not a very arable place. No. And most of Greece, even today, is not the most arable, fruitful land. It can be done, and there are certain things that flourish well in those environments, but it's not as sort of, fish jumping out of the waters, plants are just growing. Like, I'm thinking like North America before colonization, like the way the land was just so fruitful was very strange to the European settlers who were coming over, because they were like, what? You don't have to do anything and you have all this. And so it's ringing that bell for me, where it's like, now he's in a different land, and the land itself is capable of things that he is unfamiliar with. And so it feels like, he says, like, oh, they're provided for, the gods give them rain and blah 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 and all these things. Yeah. And it's more just like there's a vast difference in the actual geographical land. The Cyclops don't need to work as hard to have the same amount of food and resources available to them as the Greeks did, because their land is just capable of more.
Well, and I think, like, yes, and I think what is really being, dug at here is the indigeneity to a land, is the like allowing a land to do what comes naturally and living off of that, rather than forcing what you want onto that land. Yes. And it like, to me, I mean, the land is a huge thing and it comes back, but also this obsession he has with them and laws is really interesting to me, because he calls them lawless like a handful of times, and he's talking like, okay, they don't hold councils, they have no common laws, they live in caves, whatever. But then simultaneously, because this is what I think is so interesting, because he's so mad that they don't have laws and councils and whatever and families like the Greeks, but in the same sentence he acknowledges that it works. Yeah. Like, he's like, they don't have common laws, they each make laws for their own families. And it's like, okay, so they have laws and it's working. And then he's also like, he's without concern for what others think. And it's like, okay, they're living happily in the way that they have decided.
And I this to bring back another comparison to early settling in North settler colonialism in North America. You know, British came over here, French came over here, and they were like, oh, these people don't have, you know, our form of government or our laws, so they are lawless. And it's like, I hate to break it to you, but, you know, there are so many different tribes and bands, nations across North America, and they all had various different forms of government.
Yeah.
It just didn't look like the British government, the French government. And so there is a, you know, it's that idea of our way is the right way. And you see that a lot in Greek ancient Greek understandings of things. And especially in their myths, you know, like the older generations of the gods are wild and they are chaotic and they are of the earth and there's this feminine energy to it and there's monstrous. While the Olympians, you know, well, they have law and order.
Zeus is the supreme leader.
Patriarchy and stuff. And so there's this heavy emphasis that comes into the Greek world on their idea of what law and order and civilization looks like. And that's not unique to Greece as well. You know, that is a very 100% there are nations in Canada who felt that way too.
Oh,
and that's
sure,
that's how conflict and wars start.
Yeah.
You know, like you just feel your way is the right way.
Well, and the thing that I think stands out about this being Greek in this case, but you're right, it does apply all over for sure. Like this is human.
Yes.
But what makes this so interesting and like formative is the way that texts like this and Greek culture paved the way for quote unquote Western civilization, right? Because like that's the key difference. It's like, yeah, this is all very human. But the way the Greeks used it then became, and I don't even mean the Greek, like the Greeks had their own issues for sure, but like you said, like everyone had that. But then later, Western culture was built around this in a way that became like heavily problematic.
Because the Western European cultures look back at the high age of Greece, classical Greece, as that is their inheritance and like foundation, you know, like that is where European culture and civilization comes from, and that is what should be emulated. And you know, that's you know, like that is a result of later design. You know, I don't want to necessarily put it on the ancient Greeks, although they absolutely did.
They had their shit, but you're right. It is the bigger issue is a later construct.
Yeah, the way it becomes the way it affects our world today, and from settled colonial perspectives, from general, like, you know, enslavement in the Western world, is really a result of later thought and later construction from people who are they themselves not Greek. You know, like that's also the linchpin in it that I think people forget is this creation and this use of classics does not come from Greece itself, because the Greeks
was just who they were.
They were under an imperial power. They were under the Ottomans.
They were colonized.
They were and
for like 2,000 years.
Yeah. And I've had many conversations with this about my friend, because I also, you know, I'm an indigenous woman and I go to Greece and I love Greece, and I'm just like, am I part of the problem too? And then, you know, one of my friends said to me, she was like, Kate, but Michaela, you actually talk to Greek people and you listen to them and you want to hear about their version of history and what is meaningful to them. And, you know, you sit there and you can say who Theodorus Kolokotronis is. Like, you've learned about modern Greek history because, and you can look at it and you can apply it to how Greeks are today.
Yeah.
So there is a, you know, it's how you interact with things, because Greeks today are not a result of ancient Greeks.
No.
Are they absolutely proud of that heritage? Yes. Do they have every right to that heritage? Yes. But they are who they are because of the past couple centuries. And that is the
millennia.
Them.
Like that's what's so interesting. Yeah, they were colonizers in the ancient world, but then by first century BC, they weren't good at it. It wasn't their big priority. Like Rome came in and was like, hold my beer. We're going to become like,
because they never unified. It's really, they had no real claim to power, because while, you know, Rome was able to sort of unify all the different tribes and nations in ancient Italy, under, the Latins and Romans. Greece never did that. They were all the city-states were constantly fighting against each other and who can be better, blah, 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 which just makes them weaker.
Well, and that's what, to bring it back to the Odyssey, because
Yes.
No, we could talk about this forever, but I'm also trying to make sure that we don't. But yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting, and why, like, any kind of critique I have about these aspects of the Odyssey are not like a critique on the Greek people. They're about, like, it's this wider understanding, and how it's just this wider notion of, like, how this type of thing became formative to later very problematic settler colonialism, and how these stories, like, when you actually are reading them with a critical lens, where you can see how, like you were saying with the Iliad, because it's so true here too, like, Homer, as a quote-unquote person, whatever he was, is critiquing these ideals. Like, Odysseus is the main character, but he is not the good guy. Like, those are two different things. And in this case, like, we have this story, and for me, the story with Polyphemus is the most interesting, because there's so many things at play. Like, when we get this first description of the Cyclops, like, it goes on and on. There's like 2 ebook pages worth of critiquing how they are not like the Greeks, how they don't farm like the Greeks, they don't use their land like the Greeks, they don't have ships even though they have a really good harbor, and they would be really good seafarers, but they don't care, and they don't have laws, but they get along just fine, and all of these things where it's both acknowledging the ways that they don't fit with the wider Greek culture, but also why they are living quite happily and there is no issue amongst them. Like, there could be, but we are not told about any issue amongst the Cyclopic people.
And I think also, if we look at Homer, not just, if, I'm of the belief Homer is a tradition.
I know. We use the word Homer, but we don't acknowledge that it was one person. That's crazy.
But I think that's interesting, too, to think of it as this is a tradition that grew out of a group of people, and they all shared this thought. They're all critiquing this. They're all saying, here's our characters. They're not good. They're not
main
bad.
Characters. Doesn't mean they're good.
Yes, it is an examination of human beings. And they're examining, I think, themselves and how they interact with the world, and like that's what myths are for. That is how you understand your place in the world, and they're doing that in a way that they are not only highlighting the good stuff, but they are also highlighting and asking questions about the negative things and going, why, what is this, what is this about us? We are approaching something wrong. And I think that is very clear between Odysseus and the Cyclops. Like they are, and I think that's interesting to see that as coming from a tradition of people and not just a person, because then now we can see that as an understanding between, it's not just one unique figure, one unique voice. It is a group of people all sort of simultaneously saying, let's examine this about ourselves.
It's this very cultural like question of like what it isn't landing on a good guy, a bad guy. It isn't landing on good and bad, because that's not the point. The point is the question. And that's what's so interesting to me. And like, I mean, admittedly, conveying that to children has been quite interesting, but I think I'm hoping I'm doing a pretty good job of it. Especially with the Cyclops. I really go back and forth with the whole bit of the story, because like, again, I mean, even in this one little piece, there are not good guys and bad guys. There are people, and I won't say human because one are Cyclops, but like it is still looking at the like human condition, the very notion of being a human, and particularly being a human in a community, because there's this whole critique about how they use their land, who they are, what they do, whatever, but there's no acknowledgement that there's any like bad ramifications of how they live. They just live differently from Odysseus. He's got a lot of judgment on that. But overall, it's like, that's just the way it is. But then he goes in and he has this expectation of Xenia that I think is so interesting and really complex, because he it's kind of unclear, but the implication is he doesn't know at the time that they are Cyclops who live on this island. But at the same time, it's like the way it's told in the story, we know right off the bat that they are Cyclops.
Do we trust
and that
him?
exactly right. And so it's funny because first they land on the island across from the Cyclops. They land on an uninhabited, like, goat-filled island. They eat their fill of goats. Everyone's quite happy. And then they see smoke rising from the island across the strait. Mm-hmm. And the men are like, all right, we've eaten well, like, let's get on our way. And Odysseus is like, no, we gotta go over and see who's over there. And that's number one,
famous
right?
Last words.
And then it gets worse. So he takes just one ship. He takes his ship and his men over, and the 11 other ships stay behind.
Yeah.
And he goes over there, and they immediately find this cave house, right?
Yep.
And they go in. They're like, this is a shepherd's house. Mm-hmm. They can tell from everything in and outside of it. It is a shepherd's house. They're very judgy of it because he lives inside a cave, and it's like not up to the Greek standards, but this is a shepherd's house. He's not there, though. He's out with his flocks. He's literally just doing his job. And his men, so they go inside. They find cheese. They find very explicitly, he's got, like, lambs and stuff that are too young to be out with the flock. They're in the cave. Yeah. The men are like, great, we can get some more food. Let's take a bunch of his cheese. Let's get some of these animals. Let's drive them back to the ship, steal them, and then flee and be gone before he comes back.
Yeah. And then, and then comes back. There's all the drama.
No, but
Oh.
No.
How much more?
No.
Because I have thoughts. I
want you to. But because the thing that really stands out, because they want to just steal all of his food and leave. Yeah. And then Odysseus says, no, we have to wait for him to come back. He might give us gifts. And that's the important part that I wanted to stay for, because that is Odysseus seeking Xenia. He's seeking gifts of Xenia, of guest friendship, from someone who he has already violated his laws as the guest. He's seeking a host, even though he has already violated the laws of a guest. And that's what's interesting to me.
Well, and so what was coming to my mind, what kind of was popping up is, I'm remembering this is a story being told after the events. Mm-hmm. This is a story being told by the person who is there, who has already told us that he lies.
Yep.
And, he's admitting some things and not others. And fourthly, what the people he ends up, disrespecting, essentially, are categorized and shown to be monsters. Mm-hmm. And now, other. What if
the key is other? I think not even monster, because
there is a monstrous aspect to it, and I think that's because it justifies his actions if they are monsters.
But
others, but also monsters.
But I don't know. I think we got to be careful with what we talk about in Greek monsters, because there is a line that is so modern of our idea of monsters, because in the text he's very much like, the way they are described is as if they are pretty human. Like, he doesn't give a description of them with the one eye until much later. Like, their lives, their described lived experiences are very human, and that's what I think is important to remember.
Yes, but I think the the monstrous and othering things, it helps justify the terrible thing Odysseus has done by disrespecting. Yeah. But it's interesting, it comes afterwards. This is a story being told, and that is what's kind of ringing warning bells for me, where it's going, okay, Odysseus has come in and he has disrespected his own culture's rules for this sort of thing. And these are also like, generally all cultures sort of have this idea of, if you are a guest on somebody else's home or land, you need to respect your person and they respect you back. Like,
it's
that's very
respect.
Common. Yep. That is extremely common.
That's human.
And he comes in and he immediately do it. And he knows he is wrong. So what does he have to do to justify his wrong? Oh, well, this is a guy who comes in and he starts eating us. Look at him. He's different. they're different.
Yeah.
They're not like us. So this is an afterward. This is not the narrative as it is happening. This is the narrative afterwards. He has had many, many years to think about this event. And he goes, how I know I have done the terrible thing of walking into somebody else's house. We have made plans to stay things. We are now, it's very possible at the time he didn't say, oh no, we should stay for gifts. Perhaps at the time they were caught stealing things. But, now he is bringing in, we were trying to do this, our culture's thing. We were trying to respect Xenia, but he didn't. And to make himself look good, he needs to monsterize the other to justify his next actions and what happened and to make him look good.
Yeah. No, and yes. And it's so... because the othering to me, and that's why I want to say other instead of monsters, because he definitely does. Like there is a monstrifying nature, especially when he comes in and he eats the men. Yes, absolutely. But I think that the thing that stands out overall and before that moment is the other. And like the other versus monster, like they are meant to be different. They are culturally different. And that is the bigger issue before the monstrosity comes in. And even that monstrosity is in the form of violence in this way where like, he doesn't look human, but that is the secondary issue to kind of what Odysseus is experiencing. And I say that because in comparison to the Lystragonians, I find it really interesting because with the Cyclops, we get this like long and detailed thing about how they're not normal and they're not Greek and they're lawless and barbaric and all of these things that he is using to justify his crime.
His bad behavior.
Exactly. His failure to follow Xenia.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, it blows up in a way that like, Polyphemus does some bad stuff too. You shouldn't probably eat people. But why were those men in a position to get eaten? One, because they stole this man's food and livestock. And two, because Odysseus refused to leave before he could get more glory.
Hubris.
Because it's hubris and it's the kleos, right? Like the glory. Odysseus is obsessed with kleos, with that need for glory, to the point where even when after the first men are eaten and when Odysseus is like, okay, I've got to come up with a plan to like help us escape because we can't get out on our own, whatever. He literally is like, all right, I've come up with my most brilliant of plan. I came up with a lot of cunning plans, but this one's my most brilliant. And then he's like, oh, I'll get revenge and glory. And that's really clear. Like that's what he wants. And he only wants revenge because he kind of manufactured a reason for it. Like I feel like he wanted this violence against the Cyclopic people, and it feels manufactured the way he got to it. Like if you break into somebody's house, steal all of their stuff, and then stay behind long enough for them to come back, like, and then somehow when they enact their form of retribution for what you did, you turn them into the person that needs to be defeated. Like that feels so manufactured in a very interesting way.
Well, and I think it's interesting that it is cannibalism that,
but it technically isn't, because he's not a human.
But here's the thing, that brings in the monsterizing thing.
Yeah.
Where, if it's just the other, it is cannibalism because the other is still human. And so he monsterizes it by adding this aspect. And also, like, the Cyclops, other than the one eye and being pretty tall, are extremely human in appearance. Like, it's not really but it's the actions. And that they do this very horrible thing. They're eating their guests. There's this cannibalism slant to it, I guess, is really interesting because it absolutely justifies everything Odysseus does to them, because it's fine, we can do this because here are these horrible people who eat people, here are these horrible monsters, they're eating people, they're a danger. And it's like, would
they have eaten people if you hadn't
stolen their food
and been hiding in their house? Because it, like, to me, I mean, at that point, because it's interesting. Also, Polyphemus kills them first, which I find to be quite interesting. At least with the first 2 men, because he kills a total of 6. 3 meals, 2 in each hand.
Nice.
And the first time though, he very explicitly picks these men up, hits their heads on the ground, and then eats their bodies. And I think that's very interesting, is he doesn't eat them alive. And, you know, I mean, obviously it's like, it's a weird thing to be like debating these like intricacies, but it's so interesting to me because that part feels more like defending your land and property and things, and
it sounds like he took out 6 guys.
Yeah, who invaded your house and stole your food and threatened you.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And in a realm where there's, you know, no cops to come save you, ACAB. Like, it's just ACAB but Odysseus. But no, it's so interesting. ACAB? No. Aob?
It's fine.
It's fine. ACAB but Odysseus. But no, and that's the thing, and it's so interesting. But then, so generally, I think this whole encounter with the Cyclops is so interesting and really, like, I don't know. It was one of the harder. I think it was the most difficult bit I've written so far, because I wanted to convey what's happening and not like brush
Minimize.
over. Yeah, and to make clear that, like, both of the people involved here are doing bad things. Like, Odysseus is not a victim. Polyphemus is a victim, but he takes that victimhood into violence that is not okay.
Yeah.
But, like, and Polyphemus is so sympathetic in a way where, like, I have a bunch of kids' editions that, thankfully, it's worked out very well that I am the nerd who for the last 10 years has been collecting every single edition of the Odyssey I could possibly find at any place at any time. Because it's really come in handy, and I have so many kids' editions, and Polyphemus is always depicted as this horrible monster who just eats people, and he's so violent. And I think it's really important to look at the ways that Odysseus is incredibly xenophobic when he first arrives, the way he judges everything, the way, like, everything in the lead up is meant to make Polyphemus less sympathetic. But despite that, he remains very sympathetic. Like, he has a favorite ram. Yeah. And he has, like, and in this translation, it's called he's a sweet ram. Oh. And, like, he loves his animals. Yeah. He cares for them first more than anything. He milks his ewes, and then he puts them with their babies. Like, he's taking care of them. He is a shepherd. He is a shepherd more than anything else. And to me, like, that was really important to convey, while also being like, oh no, he eats people, and that's not great. Yeah. But why?
And I think that's sort of the primary thing people have to keep with them when they go into reading the Odyssey, especially the part where he's telling the story to the Phaeacians. We are being told a story. Our narrator is a character in the story who, when we are first introduced to him, is being called topsy-turvy, complicated, a man
Lord
of many
of lies.
turns. You know, this is who is telling, for those chapters, that story. And you need to know, you know, we can't trust them. You know, read the secret history. Well, who is it? Richard? I don't remember the main character's name. Unreliable narrator. We don't trust them. You cannot trust Odysseus. And that is fascinating and fun and interesting. But you have to keep that in mind when you're reading it and not put that down.
Yeah. And it's I'm overall obsessed. I just want to wrap this one up.
Yes. I'm looking at the time too.
I know. But I just want to compare it real quick with the Lystragonians, because when he leaves the Cyclops, and then next they land on the island of Aeolus, who's, you know, the king of the winds. There's a whole wind saga. That's it's not relevant to my point, so I'm not going to retell it. But, like, after that, they end up in the land of the Lystragonians. And what's so interesting to me is that, like, on the surface, the Lystragonians are the same as the Cyclops. They are giants who eat people. But that is where it all falls apart. Like, there's no similarities otherwise. Like, Odysseus, when they land there, there's a whole thing to say about how Odysseus handles that one, because he basically allows for himself to remain safe, and then, like, 500 plus of his men die because he's a dumbass. But outside of that, he sends his men to find the people who live on this land, to figure out who they are, like in that same way that he's always doing that. He wants the guest gifts. And then a lot of times, like, that is appropriate. You go and you put yourself before the people who live there and you say, hi, I'm traveling. I would love a place to stay and some food. Here's what I can offer you in return, whatever. And his men go and we're told that they like run into a daughter of the king who apparently isn't a giant. I don't know. They trust her and they let her lead them to the palace. And then they get inside this palace and they're literally put before the king and the queen. And it's like, oh my God, they're giants. And they don't even get to say a word. The king just picks up one of the men and eats him. And then they all run and shit blows up and it's terrible. But it's so interesting to me that like, that is a position where they are actually following Xenia. They are, without initial violence, they are going to the leaders and asking for whatever. Like, because first they see the daughter and they say like, hey, we, are visitors and whatever. She brings them to the palace. And they don't get a chance for anything else. They are attacked and eaten. That is, to me, like monstrous action. That is overt violence. That is, so different from the Cyclops. Because none of that would have happened with the Cyclops if Odysseus hadn't invaded that space and stolen everything. And it's such an interesting juxtaposition. And that's the thing it's been like, how does one convey that without too many details? Because it is so similar and yet so different. And it's just fascinating to me that we have these two types of like man-eating giants, and yet the relationship to them is conveyed so differently. The judgment of their culture, like there's none of that. I mean, it's yeah.
And who they're interacting with is different in each culture as well. With the Cyclops, they're interacting with a shepherd. With the Lystragonians, they're interacting with the king and queen and the daughter. Like there is a they're interacting with the royalty. So there are two different dimensions here in terms of the actual people.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that, because to me that then really makes the initial description of the Cyclops stand out, where they have no laws, they hold no councils, and so they do not have a king. And so because they don't have a king, Odysseus feels that he can just roll up into anyone's house and steal their shit, because they don't have those customs. Whereas the Lystragonians have a king, they go to that king, he eats them, they run. Like, it's such a different it's like Odysseus respects the culture of the Lystragonians, even though they are actually terrifying. And he doesn't respect the like culture, the customs of the Cyclops. And so like he causes all of this problem. And like, thankfully too. And I think this says a lot about the way you're saying, like, this is a critique. Yeah. Is that he is full on cursed by Zeus and Poseidon for how he handles Polyphemus. Yeah, that says a lot, because he broke Xenia and therefore he is cursed by Zeus. Zeus makes it so those Lystragonians kill. I'm keep a tally in the book, which I think is quite fun. And the Lystragonians kill almost all of them, 11 ships of men out of 12. Yeah. And so like that's because of Zeus. Zeus is like, even at the end, Odysseus is like, Zeus was mad at me. He's already planning on destroying all my ships.
Yeah, and for Zeus to be that mad at you've had to have done something pretty bad. You've had to, so we can assume that whatever the hell happened really actually happened with the Cyclops.
No, exactly.
Was pretty fucking bad.
Yes, and so like, it's really interesting. It's very. It is. And I do think we could talk about this forever.
We absolutely could.
We're going to wrap this one up. To the listeners on the regular feed, you can imagine me reading the credits here. They're the same every time. So just picture I've said all of that. And if you are curious about the questions that we're going to answer from the patrons, or you want to see this video, come on over to Patreon, where we are trying to build a backup plan, because ad revenue is going down into the drain, and we want to stay afloat. So I don't know, consider ad-free and little subscription.
Support us.
Some of our you just get our undying love. It's like a whole thing. Yeah. Patreon.com/mythsbaby if you're curious for more. And if not, enjoy this free episode, and I will see you on Friday anyway.